What's up everybody, Chris here from Bold Canyon Outdoors, and I'm working with GearAmerica today to bring you a video about tips and tricks for winch recovery and vehicle recovery. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over and take a look at the gear we're talking about today. All right, let's take a look. You'll have to bear with me. We're out here in the desert as usual. Sun is shining, birds are singing, but we've got a lot of sun glare, so sorry about shadows and glare, but let's take a look and see what we're going to be working with today. All right, first and foremost, this gear bag comes with the Ultimate Winching and Rigging Off-Road Recovery Kit. Now, if you guys have seen my other videos with my outtakes, you know that's a hard one to say. And in that kit, you get a tow strap, a tree strap, a snatch block, 2 of the heavy-duty D-rings, and a pair of gloves. So it's a very comprehensive kit, but I'm going to go over each of these here. So first off, you've got the bag. Now, not only does it hold all the gear, but you can use it as a damper for your winch line. Next up, we have the Ultra Snatch Block. Now, this is a lightweight aluminum snatch block. It's designed for synthetic winch line. This has a 20,000 pound workload or a 40,000 pound MBC, which is a minimum brake capacity. A minimum brake capacity is essentially the minimum in testing that it took to break one of these things. So you're good up until that point, but they say the 20,000 pounds is your workload on this thing, which is still pretty heavy. Next up, we've got the Mega Shackles. These are a really super duty shackle. They have a 17,000 pound workload and a 68,000 pound MBC. After that, we've got their HD shackle. Now, most people look at this and say that kind of looks like a standard D-ring or a standard shackle, and it is, but this is a heavy-duty version with 10,500 pound workload and a 58,000 pound minimum brake capacity. Next to that, we have the new Uber shackle. Now, the Uber shackle has a 20,000 pound workload and an 80,000 pound minimum brake. Now, what sets this apart from the rest of them is this little key here, because the Uber shackle has an anti-theft device here. It actually has a reverse threaded cap in the opposite side of the shackle pin, so you can use this key here with a triangular bit on it, so to speak, and put in that reverse threaded cap. So if somebody wants to try to take one of these off your rig without your permission and they keep loosening the pin, they're actually tightening the cap. So it's got a nice little anti-theft feature for when you keep them on the front of your rig, and it keeps the unsavory characters from taking your gear. All right, and of course we have the standard snatch block that comes with the kit, and GearAmerica gloves. You're always going to want to be wearing gloves. Now, this tow strap here is a 3-inch, which has a 35,000 pound working capacity, and of course the twin to it is the 8-foot tree strap with the 35,000 pound capacity. So that's the gear we're going to be taking a look at today. And oh yeah, over here on the side, we've got our worst case scenario. If you get that stuck, better start digging. Got the shovel. You can find all this gear and more at GearAmerica.net. I'm going to put a link to GearAmerica down below, and I'm also going to put in a discount code so you can save some money when you gear up. Okay, so this is going to be a video about tips and tricks, but it's also going to have a lot of do's and don'ts about it. And 2 very specific do's that I want to stress at the very beginning is go slow and wear gloves. If you take your time on these recoveries and winches and things like that, you're not setting yourself up for failure and disappointment. Just go slow, 1 step at a time. You're in no hurry. Remember, you're trying to perform a recovery, not a race. So get those gloves on and go slow. Now, we're in the desert outside of Phoenix, and as you can see, we don't have a lot of trees out here. So I'm going to use a small tree right here as a demonstration on how to hook up a tree strap, D-rings, and things like that. But keep in mind, this is for demonstration purposes only. We would never winch from a tree this size, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right, so for hooking up a tree strap, and like I said, this tree is for demonstration purposes only, but the reason for a tree strap or a tree saver is to do exactly what the name is called. It's to save the tree. So you never want to run a winch line around the tree or a winch cable around the tree where you can cut through the bark and potentially kill the tree. We want to use a tree as a recovery point if we get stuck, because chances are the next person behind you is going to get stuck too, and we don't want to kill these trees and ruin the chance for the next person. Now, as you can see on this, I am really low to the ground. In an absolute worst case scenario, if I needed a gentle winch out of a small tree like this, you would want the tree saver as close to the ground as humanly possible. Now, this is a multi-step thing. If I was going to winch out from a tree, a small tree, I'd want it super close to the ground, and I'd also want somebody standing behind the tree to monitor the ground to see if roots are pulling up or if trunk is breaking, things like that, because we don't want to damage these trees. So you want to stay as close to the ground as possible when you run this tree saver around it. Now, there are a few exceptions. If you have a huge tree and you're in a deep bog hole where your bumper's up against the exit part and you're stuck and you need to get a little bit more leverage, so you need to bring it up on the tree a little bit, sometimes there's an exception in extreme cases, but for the most part, you want to be as low to the ground as possible on your anchor. Next up, let's talk about how we're going to hook up a D-ring to these. So here I've got a shackle, much foliage on it. We're going to take the pin out and we're going to run it through these. Now, put it through both loops. And at this point, we're going to hook up the winch line. Oops, wrong side. And you are always going to run it straight like this. Never side load a D-ring. So I start talking about, 16,000 pound minimum workload and thousands and thousands of tons or pounds, sorry, of braking strength. Well, that's pulling this way. You're pulling pin against loop. You're never side loading a shackle when you're doing a recovery. So there's a do, there's a don't. So if you hook it all up and for some reason it gets mixed up like this, like I said, take your time, do it right, loosen it up, get it pointing in the right direction, and do your pull. If you are stranded or stuck out in the middle of nowhere and all you have is an ocotillo, a palo verde, maybe a saguaro cactus, and you don't have a good anchor point, one thing you can always count on is using a buddy's rig. So we're going to show you some techniques for using a buddy's rig if you need to get unstuck. Now, as you can see, I actually have my tree saver attached to the front of this Bronco. Now, let's take a look at this attachment point, because first and foremost, you want to make sure anywhere you attach is going to be frame mounted, not on a bumper. I've seen people tear off things like this. These are not super solid. Sure, maybe to push something out of the way, but that is not an anchor point. But underneath here, you can see it has a frame mounted hook. And that's what I'm going to use for demonstration purposes, because you always want to be frame mounted when you're doing a pull from another vehicle. Now, over here, I've got the Jeep. And as you can see, I have a shackle on the front, which has a mount that's mounted through to the frame. We've got the winch, excuse my shadow. So there's lots of options there. But sometimes you just don't know what's on the rig. So just make sure you're always using a frame mounted point to do a recovery. Another thing you want to consider when you're winching off a buddy's rig is the weight of the vehicles. Now, this 86 Bronco only weighs a few hundred pounds more than my 14 Wrangler, but that's okay. It's a similar weight. Now, if I was out wheeling with a buddy who drove a 1982 Volkswagen Rabbit truck that only weighed 2,200 pounds, that might become an issue. Because you got to keep in mind, not only am I dealing with 4,400 pounds of weight plus people and gear in the Wrangler, but I'm also dealing with the amount of weight of stuck it is. If I'm stuck in the mud, I may be trying to pull out 7,000 or 8,000 pounds. So I have a 9,500 pound capacity winch, so that'll be fine. But if I'm winching to a buddy that only weighs 4,700 pounds, all that's going to do is slide that vehicle closer to mine and cause damage or make things more stuck. All right, so my Jeep is only about 20 paces away from the Bronco right now. But just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to pretend that it's way out there in the desert stuck somewhere. And this Bronco is my only anchor point, and I can't get it any closer because situations like this do happen. So what do? I've got about 90 feet of synthetic winch line on the Jeep, but it doesn't get me close enough. I've got to 30-foot strap right here, and another 8 feet right there. You know what? That's going to do the trick. So let's get them hooked together and see how to do that correctly. All right, so we've got one vehicle here, we've got one way down over there. So not only do I have my winch line, but we need to use a combination of tow straps or tow strap and tree saver to get the distance to be able to winch it out. So here's a tip to connect these two together without them binding up and unable to get undone. So let's take the shorter strap, and we'll put the longer straps loop through, and I'm going to pull the whole strap through here. So now we've got what looks like kind of a figure 8. Now, if you were to hook these up to a 5,000 pound rig there, a 4,500 pound rig there, and a 9,500 pound winch and pull it all to capacity, this would create a knot that would be so stuck you'd never get it undone. So here's the tip. Take a rag, take a glove, take your t-shirt, anything like that, and push it through that knot. That way, when it cinches up, you'll still have something in there that's going to have some give to it that you'll be able to pull out and get that knot undone. I've seen people do this without something in the middle, and that knot never came undone. They actually had to cut it out. Now, this is nice gear. You know, it's got a lifetime warranty, but it's not going to have a lifetime warranty if you have to cut it. So take care of your gear. Put a glove, a t-shirt, a rag right in the center of the knot of the two loops, and that way you'll be able to get it undone. All right, so let's take a look at some do's and don'ts when you're hooking up a winch to a buddy's rig. Now, as we talked about before, I have a frame-mounted hook on the Bronco down here, so it's a good, solid point. I've got it hooked up to a tree saver. That's hooked up to my winch line. Now, as you can see here, I've got a shackle in here, and I'm not side loading it. We always want to go end to end. We talked about that with the tree over there. So this is hooked up correctly. Now, since I have both a winch line and a strap on this for that long distance pull, I want to put a damper on both sides just to be safe. So, got my GearAmerica bag, throw a couple of rocks in there, and we'll take this guy and we'll put it on the winch line. We got a little weight on there. Now, if you notice, I'm a little closer to the hook than I am to the rig. That's because if this breaks off right here, I know that hook isn't going to go all the way back and damage the car or damage a person. Next up, I've got this strap right here. And I'm not using it for the recovery, but since I want to put another damper on this section of the line, just in case, you can coil this around and put a little extra weight on it. Now you've got both lines dampened and you're ready to do a winch pull. Now, here's another don't. Don't ever step over a winch line. And when you're winching, don't stand close to it. You want to stay away from it. You don't want to step over it. This is a very heavy duty thing going on here. There's a lot of potential energy. And if you do everything safely and correctly, there won't be an issue. But just in case, wear gloves, go slow, don't step over the winch line. Let's cruise back over to the Jeep. All right, so we're just about ready to do our pull. I've got my controller here, it's plugged in, everything's working, and we're ready to go. A couple things I always want to check. Make sure we're locked in on the winch. Make sure there's no obstructions on the winch line. And then if you take a look at the fair lead here, we're pulling at a slight angle, and that's why this fair lead has a beveled edge. Some fair leads have rollers on them. They're designed to have a slight angle. You don't ever want to pull it at an extreme angle. If you're pulling and it looks like the cord at an angle like this, don't do it. Figure out how to reposition or use one of those snatch blocks to make sure you're pulling in a decent manner. Now, I'm beside the winch line, I'm out of harm's way, and this is when we can start winching. Like I said, go slow. If you need to go to the other side of the winch line, take the extra couple seconds, walk around this rig, walk around that rig. Don't step over. Like I said, a lot of potential energy in there. We don't want anything breaking or injuring anybody. It's all about safety. Here's a little tip. Hand signals for winching. Now, hand signals for winching, you can go back to old mining days when they use hand signals when they're winching carts out and things like that. There's a lot of noise, a lot of fuss. There can be communication. Like you could say, whoa, but they think you said go. Don't want that to happen. So here's some hand signals that can help you out when you're winching. All right, 2 thumbs in means winch in. 2 thumbs out means winch out. Raised hand with a fist means stop. Working your hands back and forth like this means I've got some work to do on the rig. So do nothing. At that point, the driver should put the winch controller down and just wait for commands. Forefinger to thumb means bump the winch. Give me a little nudge. Hey! Shush! All right, so here we are out in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and the birds love me out here apparently. So we talked about good winch anchor points. Sometimes you've got something with a bunch of thorns on it, as beautiful as it is. Sometimes you've got a tiny tree, which is a last case, worst case scenario, so please try to avoid it. Other things you can use, if you've got nothing but dirt or sand as far as the eye can see, maybe you can find a rock. A rock is also a worst case scenario. You don't really want to use a rock, but if you can get a tree strap or a tow strap completely around the base of a large rock, you can use a rock to winch you out. Other things I've seen, people will bury a tire, run a strap through the hole in the side of the wheel, bury a tire about 4 feet down, and honestly, that'll give you a little bit of a weight to pull it out. But in a pinch, always bring a shovel with you, because there's no substitute for digging like crazy for a few hours to get a rig unstuck. So there you have it. There are some tips and tricks for when you're winching and rigging and doing some recovery work trying to get a vehicle unstuck. Remember those 2 important ones. Always go slow, always wear gloves. But take a look at the do's and don'ts. Make sure you're safe at all times. And remember, this is all about getting yourself out safely and getting home. So do me a favor, hit that like, hit that subscribe down below. I'll be bringing you lots more information as we go. And one other thing, if you've got a tip or a trick, leave it below. I'll take a look at this again. I'll do another tips and tricks video. If I use your tip or your trick, I'll give you credit in the video. So leave some comments below if you've got questions, comments, or concerns. But that's it for now. For Gear America, this is Chris at Bold Canyon Outdoors signing off. Happy trails, everybody.